New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
Hello and welcome to Growing Edge Live. I'm Allie Benjamin, and it is my great joy to be here again with another wonderful show featuring a very powerful leader. And I'm so glad that you're here to join us in having this conversation. Every week, we have conversations with soul-centered individuals that are channeling their time, their talent, energy, resources, their creativity, and their love into doing good work in the world. And we are sponsored by Satya. And Satya is a center for conscious living up in northern Utah in the USA. And we're all about inspiring minds, healing hearts, transforming lives, and evolving consciousness. And I'm very glad that you're here today because I have a very special guest that is coming in all the way from Australia. And I'd like to introduce Tony Fahkry. Come on, Tony. There he is. Welcome.
Hi, Allie.
Hi, good to see you.
Likewise.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. And how are you?
I'm good. I'm here in Utah. It's nice weather. How about you? You're down under.
Yeah, we're in Victoria. Well, I'm in Victoria, Australia, and we're in spring at the moment, but we're having a bit of an overcast day, but it's a little bit chilly at the moment.
Well, I'm glad that you are able to join us today, and we got our time zones all lined up and correct. We've had a few misfires trying to record our show at the right time, the same time. It's the evening for me, it's the morning for you. So we're here, we did it. So I want to read a little bit about you, introduce you. Tony is an authority in self-empowerment with over 15 years as an author, speaker, and life coach. He specializes in understanding human behavior, connecting self-improvement, personal growth, and leadership. Tony is the creator of the highly regarded self-development program, The Power to Navigate Life. And this is based on his book bearing the same title. This comprehensive program imparts easily applicable principles that empower participants to attain mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Tony has two more books. One is Reconstructing the Past to Create a Remarkable Future. That's a great title. And the second, Awaken Your Authentic Self. Tony writes articles for many popular lifestyle-related platforms. He has a keen interest and solid grounding in mental resilience and mindfulness. And Tony finds fulfillment in coaching individuals online, and you can reach him at his website, tonyfahkry.com. And there it is. We'll post it for those of you that cannot see us. You're watching or listening on the podcast. It's tonyfahkry.com. So there you go. That's Tony. I'm so
Thank you for a wonderful introduction.
Yeah, you're welcome. So let's get to know you a little bit. Where you're in, there's your website. You're in Australia. Have you always lived in Australia?
Yeah, so I've always lived in Australia. I spent some time in Italy in my earlier 20s, but mainly for the most part, I've always lived here in Australia.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your life. A lot of our guests and a lot of our viewers are on a path of personal development, spirituality, and I'd love to know a little bit about your background. Where were you?
Yeah.
Was your family religious? Were you into spirituality? When did that all start for you?
Yeah. Um, I had an interesting upbringing insofar as spirituality was not something that I actively sought. However, I did grow up in the Catholic Church. I was an altar boy, and I would read every Sunday at Mass at our church, at our state church here in Victoria. So in that regard, I did have some connection to a greater power, a greater intelligence. Um, However, having pursued that, I never actively sought to become a author and a speaker and a coach. It was thrust upon me, and we'll probably get to that throughout the show. But my father and mother, my father was a tailor. He passed away over 25 years ago. He was a menswear tailor, and my mother a dressmaker. And so I grew up in a very creative environment. And in that regard, I thought that I wanted to follow in my father's footsteps because he worked from home, fashioning fabrics, for politicians in our state and so forth. And so I had this desire to follow in his footsteps. And by that account, I studied fashion design at the local university and attained my degree. And hence, I went over to Italy and did some work there in design. And then things changed for me. So I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma at the age of 26, and then came back home to be with family and recuperate and go through treatment. And so that's when my life was transformed. Following the recovery and having been in remission ever since, I describe it as a gradual awakening.
Mm.
And the awakening was a realization of my inner wisdom and inner powers, which became coming forth in subtle ways. And that was a really wonderful time in my life.
That sounds like it must have been a really challenging time, being abroad. How long were you in Italy?
I was there for about a year.
And
And
that,
so it was unexpected, yeah, when I was diagnosed. And so I had to come back home and obviously seek treatment.
yeah. And so you came back home and you went through a long treatment, or how long were you out of commission or under the weather or in recovery?
Yeah, so it was a 6-month chemotherapy. And what was interesting during that period is that this is my first glimpse into this sense of knowing, or this sense of awakening, was the realization that I was going to be okay. And if people have ever had this sense of knowing, for example, knowing that someone is going to call or someone is going to come by, it's an intuition, it's a guidance, it's a subtle sense of feeling. I had that throughout the whole experience. And I don't know why I knew that, but I just knew everything was going to be okay. And so the diagnosis was actually more frightening than the actual treatment. But it was just wonderful being surrounded by family and loved ones to help me through that period.
Yeah. Do you have siblings?
Yes, I have 2 sisters.
So you were really, I know because I had a child that was very ill at 10 years old. And I think when something significant happens in a family, when one of the family members gets ill, it is something happens. There's a sort of a coming together. There's some fear, obviously, around a diagnosis. But I think that fear, along with the diagnosis, along with the care that's evoked in the family members, creates a very sacred or special environment where I'm sure everyone is thinking about, wanting the best results. Those that are maybe religious or spiritual might lean more on their faith or their prayer practice. And so I know for us that it was a time where my son being much younger, obviously 10 years old, but all of us and all that care and all that love being poured in to him and all the nurses and doctors and everyone that's around really maybe creates an atmosphere for that sense of deeper discovery or deeper inquiry into, who we are and, are we going to be okay? And so maybe that sort of made it possible for you to be more tuned in, be more, have that intuition activated.
And you're quite right, Ellie. And it's the love within the family, which is the energy of love, which really is the healing agent. And I recall growing up that we would have friends over as kids, and the friends would often remark. My mother is an incredible cook, and they would often remark, even if it was their first time eating at our house, they would say, "There is so much love in this food." And it was a common theme. And it was incredible for me to hear that at the time, because I didn't know what it meant until I was an adult. And so if food carries love, then a family's togetherness carries love forth into someone's life to actually heal that person and transform that person. So there's incredible coming together and significance of love weaving its way throughout our lives if we're open to it.
Yeah, I think, even though that must have been a really hard time for all of you, I could see, and thinking back and remembering how it was for us, it was a very special time. And I think that's something that our viewers can take away into their own lives, to realize that we don't necessarily need a tragedy or a diagnosis or some trauma to occur to realize the power of love, the energy of love and care. And also what I'm hearing in this is there was a common wish or a prayer or a hope for full recovery. And so in that atmosphere of such love and such care, with that common desire, that on a not the physical level so much, although the physical is affected by that kind of energy, but the mental energy of hope and love and the emotional energy of love and hope really impact us and our lives. And I can see how that experience and that support that you felt really aided you and maybe clarified for you the desire to help others and the importance of the support that having a coach or writing a book, and of course a book continues to lend that support, that inspiration. So do you see the connection, or does that make sense, or does that...
Absolutely. Yeah, and you become transformed and transfixed by the experience, Ellie, insofar as it becomes a reference point in your life to the degree that nothing else matters. And what I've gleaned from that experience and what I write about and coach about is that you don't need to have a tragic experience in order to develop resilience, whether it's emotional resilience, physical resilience. But for me, that was a turning point, in that every experience from that point forward in my life really has sought to instill within me that nothing else matters. If I've lost money in a scrupulous, hacking or whatever it might have been. It doesn't bother me anymore. Very little bothers me these days because my reference point is far greater than anything that I can experience. Once a person faces death and becomes intimate with death, really, nothing else matters. You almost become invincible. And I don't mean invincible to the degree that you have little or no regard for life. In fact, the humility that one develops for life is incredible. I'm so passionate and so grateful to be alive and to do the work that I do, but you become so much more focused with your time, with your effort, with your consciousness, and directing your consciousness in such a way so as to serve and help those that they may not experience what you went through. And that's the turning point for me.
Beautiful. So tell me a little bit about that. When you came through that and you moved on, you were a young adult at that point, where did you get right into writing? Was that something that came out of that experience, or did you get into coaching? What was the timeline between your this illness and recovery and what you did next?
There was probably about 4 years between that time when I began writing. Writing was my first foray into the area, and that was when blogging was just starting. And so I began writing articles, and the articles were a way for me to make sense of what was going on within me. As I probably mentioned in many of my articles and books, there was this gradual awakening. And when I talk about the awakening in terms of the specifics, it was this sense of emotion, these intuitions that were coming forth. I often described, for example, being in nature and just this sense of oneness that I would experience. There was one occasion where I was in nature and for probably about 10 minutes, there were no thoughts running through my mind, and I was just connected to awareness. And it was the most exhilarating and incredible moment I've ever experienced in my life. And I've had glimpses of those moments, once again. But the awareness, it was like a canvas that was like a Monet or a Renoir, and the canvas was just ecstatic. And being at one with that was just incredible. And I could see, for example, animals in the park, and I could see God in everything. And it was that I was trying to make sense of. And I couldn't talk about it to many people because they probably thought I was going crazy, and they would probably describe it as the after effects of the treatment. So there was one person who I confided in, and she was wonderful, and she was studying kinesiology at the time, and transitioning in her own life from the corporate sector into the healing arts and the modalities. So she was wonderful in helping me and guiding me in terms of making sense of what I was experiencing. And she suggested that I start writing about it, and that's where I started writing blogs.
So many things are coming up for me as you're sharing that experience. I love how you describe this experience of oneness and the experience of having no thoughts. I mean, that's what we're really going for in meditation, and it's so elusive. It's so difficult to quiet that mind for any, length of time. So those moments of grace, when they happen, when they occur, are really significant and impact us in a very deep way. And having a friend to be able to talk to about these kinds of things, because this isn't, it's getting more and more mainstream, but, in traditional religions or traditional spirituality, these moments in nature. I don't know about in Australia, but here in the West, it's kind of separate. There's the indigenous cultures that rely or pay more attention to the natural world. But in, religions as we know them, the main ones, it's different. It's not so included. And so I just wanted to point that out. And then also, I'm originally from England, but I moved to America when I was 14. And I have really been drawn to everything Native American. It really, when I came here and I started my journey of self-discovery in my 20s, I really appreciated the wisdom of the indigenous tribes of the original Americans. Not that it was America then, but so I'm wondering, and I've blended that into some of my spiritual practices and rituals and meditations. I'm wondering how that is for you, because you have obviously indigenous cultures in your part of the world. Has that been a part of your journey at all, or does that impact you?
No, I haven't had a huge impact in terms of the indigenous cultures. I have read widely about it, and at school we did study quite intensively about indigenous cultures here in Australia. And I absolutely am, so respectful of it. And here in Australia, our indigenous culture, the Aboriginal culture, talks about this dream time, which I'm absolutely fascinated by, and I love that whole idea. And having read widely across, different, new thought leaders, throughout the centuries, I can see how there's this common theme that weaves its way, not only through indigenous cultures, but through new thought, leadership and so forth. So it's very subtle, but yeah, it's always there. But yeah, I'm very mindful and respectful of it. Absolutely.
So switching gears a little bit, you mentioned this person that you were close to and felt safe with in sharing your journey. Have there been other people in your life in earlier days that have been significant, inspirational to you, or impacted you and your journey into becoming an author and a coach?
There were distant mentors, and by that I mean people that I began to read about. I read a lot because I tried to make sense of what I was going through. And so I discovered, authors such as Neville Goddard and Ernest Holmes and so forth. And I was incredibly drawn to these types of teachings. And Emmett Fox, and the more I went into this, the more I loved it. And so these became, my mentors, and I really relied on a lot of that work and channeled that into making sense of what I was going through at the time. But because I couldn't talk about what I was experiencing, and when I say I couldn't talk about it, I chose not to talk about it to the degree that I was discerning in whom I trusted with that information, only because most people were dismissive of it and most people didn't know how to give advice about it. I mean, when someone goes through a life-threatening illness, unless they too have been through it themselves or through a loved one or a friend, they really don't know how to offer support, emotional support, other than, oh, you'll be right, it's something that I'm sure you'll get through. And they're well-meaning intentions, but it's that was the type of feedback and the advice that I was getting. So ultimately, I chose not to share that information, but to keep it to myself as something sacred, and immerse myself in reading. And so reading really became sacred to me. And that's where the nuggets of inspiration would come to me to write articles as well.
Through your reading.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have a meditative practice, and what does your spirituality look like now? Being out in nature, obviously, you mentioned that. And reading and then writing, that's all a part of this expansion or the evolution of your own consciousness. So when did you write your first book?
That was in 2014.
Okay, so 10 years ago. And so what you obviously had then a particular mission or vision for your life. How has it changed since that first book to now you've authored more? You've written 700 plus articles and things. So how has your mission, your vision, your purpose evolved since then?
So Ellie, essentially, before writing, I took to public speaking, and the public speaking was a way to share a little bit of my journey, but also discuss health and well-being. And so I was doing a lot of corporate seminars at the time. And so the transition then became from speaking to writing. And so in terms of how it has changed over the years, I've really, I guess the topics that I've focused on have evolved. So in my earlier days, I would talk a lot about health and well-being. I would talk about emotions, and that gradually changed as I read more. So I loved reading the works of Dr. David Hawkins, who talked about power versus force, letting go, written some incredible books. And so he was all about consciousness. And so when I went into consciousness, then consciousness led me to Neville Goddard, to Ernest Holmes and Emmett Fox and so forth. And then from that led me to other authors who spoke about purpose. And so for me, and this might sound strange or whimsical, but it felt like the universe was my teacher, and I was undergoing a course, and the course was whatever came forth. I didn't know what the lessons were. I didn't know what the course breakdown or the syllabus was, but things would come to me at the right time, and I would learn about it and then teach about it, write about it. And once I'd gained those skills, then I would move on to something new. So it's constantly evolving throughout time, which is fascinating, and which is something I absolutely love.
Well, that's beautiful. I know we have to take a short break, and when we come back, I'd love to talk more a little bit about this evolving purpose. So we'll be right back.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, thesatyacenter, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
We're back. Hi, Tony.
Hi, Ellie.
Yeah, so we're talking a little bit about this evolution that took place, that after your surgery, or your treatment, and after your healing journey, and really tuning into your sacred path forward, feeling a connection with everything, oneness. And then the study you did and the writing you did, and that led to you being inspired and speaking and teaching others about this amazing journey that you've been on. And what struck me was your ability to articulate this sense of being able to hear your inner guidance and trust it. But imagine that somehow is something that you teach your clients about, learning to tune into that inner wisdom and expand their intuition in that way and be able to trust it. I think that that's a big part of our own evolution, is actually hearing that inner voice, listening to that inner wisdom, and trusting that. So can you talk a little bit about that in your coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. And that wisdom that you talk about, Ellie, is always there, but it becomes drowned out by our incessant thoughts, what I call the monkey mind, which is constantly analyzing and trying to make sense of reality. And it's learning to cooperate with that, incessant thoughts. And so when I referred earlier to being immersed in nature, and for about 10 minutes, there was no thought, what I'm referring to there is that pure awareness, which is always there, the pure consciousness that it's operating in the background. And I'll give an example of how wisdom comes forth. Recently, I had, a little sty in my eye, and it was bothering me, but not to the degree that it was, anything serious. And I wanted to see the optometrist, but I hadn't got round to it because of, things to do and so forth. And so time was, catching up on me. And one day I was just going for a morning walk, and I had this inspired feeling to just pop into my local optometrist because it's not far from where I live. So I went in, and I don't know why that feeling came up, but it was an inspired sensation. It was an impulse, and it was beautiful. I just knew that that's what I had to do. So I went in and I said to the woman at the counter, I realize this is unexpected, but I have this situation, a sty in my eye. Is there an available optometrist to see me? And she said, well, you're in luck because the optometrist just had a half an hour appointment become available. It was a cancellation and you've come in exactly at the right time. He'll see you right now. And so he treated it right at that very moment. And so I've been, toiling in my mind to make an appointment for about 4 weeks, and yet I never did. But on that day, that wisdom came forth and told me or communicated to me that there was an appointment available, and that if I connected with it and went to the optometrist, that I would get that appointment and have it treated. Now, I couldn't have known the circumstances or the events of the orchestration of that event occurring, because it came to me in the moment when I was present, when I was in that moment free of thought. And on that walk, I try to be present and not thinking about the past or the future, but just, concerned about my breath, about my environment, listening to children play. It's those feelings that I try to, or the environment that I really communicate through my work, is to learn to detach more from the incessant stream of thoughts and tune in to that awareness that runs deep within you, and make it a marriage of both. It doesn't have to be one or the other, because we do need to think, we do need to rationalize and plan and so forth. So it becomes a union of both. And how can we work together to allow the conscious mind and awareness to coexist together?
Beautiful. Yeah, being able to not only feel that and trust it for yourself, but to be able to support people in having that awareness for themselves must be very rewarding. So you've written these books with these incredible titles, The Power to Navigate Life, and you have a program that goes along with that. Why don't we start with that one? So what is the program? What could someone expect if they were to work with this, The Power to Navigate Life? Give us kind of a little brief overview of that.
Sure. So the book came about as a course. So it first started as a course where I was delivering workshops to the corporate community, and it was really talking about the mind-body connection and being in tune not only with our thoughts, because through the corporate environment I was dealing a lot with people who were stressed, working long hours. They were eating unhealthy, they were not sleeping well, they weren't exercising. So it was learning or teaching about the mind-body connection and how to become aware of one's thoughts, one's emotions, and also one's physical body. So the power to navigate life is really about taking life into your own hands, and becoming a conscious creator of your destiny. And by that, and I know it's an overused term that people read about and hear about so much, but it's not allowing life to pass you by, or being stuck at the steering wheel of being driven by your unconsciousness or your unconscious past. So it's really becoming the co-creator of your destiny. By understanding, Socrates said, know thyself. And so when we know oneself, we can grow oneself further. So the program is really about understanding who you are, why you are here at this point in time in the Earth's history, and what wisdom or what lessons, what skills, what talents can you bring forth into the world, because it is that actually becomes your purpose, and also awakens you to your greatest potential as well.
It sounds like you're helping people to, yes, become conscious co-creators, and the thought of living by design rather than by default, because I see so many people just doing what they do day after day and not really taking time to consider how they could create something more enjoyable by
Mm,
taking a look at, the quality of their thinking,
mm.
their, like you said, their diet, their, you know, their relationships. And so um, I would imagine that you work with more than just the corporate world. So
Yeah.
this Awaken to Your Authentic Self book, was that the most recent one?
Yeah, so that's the most recent book. So Awaken Your Authentic Self is really about becoming one with your true nature, and understanding your true nature is one of love and bliss. And when we become aligned with our God nature, then we are activating our true potential, our greatest potential, our highest potential. And the more we merge with that, sense of being, then life seems to take on its own course, and what people consider the miraculous almost become, every a part of everyday living. And so, in a lot of my work, personally, the work that I do personally, and the work that I teach, is the wonderful work of Neville Goddard, who taught that the power of the human imagination is in fact God. And so when we tap into the power of the human imagination, because we're always using our imagination, aren't we? If I have to go down to the local grocery store and buy my goods for the day, I imagine myself getting a parking spot and what I need, and I make an imaginary list of the foods or the grocery items that I need to purchase. And so he taught that when we tap into that human imagination, we construct our destiny and our reality based on what is essentially our God nature working through us.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love the work of Neville Goddard, and I can see that you do too. How about the people you work with outside of the corporate world, and maybe not completely
Mm.
outside, but what can you share a little bit about the transformations that you've witnessed based on you having people in your programs, you doing coaching? Do you have anyone at the top of your mind that's made some big shifts and changes in their lives?
Yeah, I've had many people come through the program in terms of the coaching. I recall working with an individual abroad who had been a migrant to the country that he was living at the time. And so English was his second language, and it was quite foreign to him. Yet through persistence, through his own dedication, he was able to study a degree in that country, and then gain employment in an international company. And then he basically rose within the ranks of that organization to a leadership role. Now, many of these people, my clients, attribute me to helping them, but I'm not doing the work. I'm the person that, if you're lost in a foreign town and you ask someone for direction, I'm the person that says, hey, that's the street you want to go down. That's all I'm really doing. But the more I get to know the person, the more I know how to help them. And then I show them how to help themselves. But they're doing the work. I'm not doing the work. I'm just the person standing on the corner saying, go in that direction. And then when they get to the next corner and they're lost again, I'm there again saying, hey, you might want to try this direction. So I'm almost like the GPS of coaches, constantly directing them forward. But then eventually I show them how they too can become their own GPS navigator instead of relying on me externally. So in some respect, I'm almost glad when a coaching client leaves the coaching practice, because I know that they now have the skills, the wisdom, and the ability to create their own reality without relying on someone else. And what I make it a habit of doing is following up with them 6 months later, 12 months later, 2 years later. And in many cases, they're quite dumbfounded that I maintain contact, because I'm genuinely interested to know where they are and how their life has developed.
Yeah, that's beautiful that you remain in contact with them and continue to hold the best in mind and heart for them. So what is it, do you think, these days? Because we live in such an interesting time. I don't know about your country, but here we've got an election coming up, and there's a lot of craziness and divisiveness and this sense of separation that's going on. People, and maybe this even goes back to COVID and the lockdown, and it seems like people have had, there's been a sense of struggle for many through these times. And I'm wondering, do you see particular patterns of where people get stuck? And can you share a little bit about being stuck and then getting unstuck?
Yeah, and we've seen the same thing here too, Ali. And I think COVID has become a turning point for many people, insofar as here in Australia, we're in lockdowns for long periods of time. And so people have become quite distant to one another. I recall pre-COVID, there was a greater sense of community, a greater sense of cooperation and trust. And it actually spawned an article, and it came to me, the inspiration to write the article came about through or via a walk one day, and it was, I kept hearing the word in my consciousness, cooperation. I didn't know what it meant, so I got home and I wrote down cooperation. And then later that day, I found a wonderful video on YouTube about cooperation, and it talked about how cooperation exists in the animal kingdom, and it talked about specifically in wild animals who work together to hunt their prey. And it spoke about not only the hunting of the prey, but how animals, who are, non-hunters, cooperate together as communities. And yes, there's a hierarchy within that community, but it was the cooperation that led to their survival. And so I wrote an article about that, saying that I think we're at a precipice in humanity's history where if we wish to continue to survive and thrive beyond this century, then really cooperation is the key. And I realize that that's difficult because, the political, religious systems, the financial systems that exist between nations, but cooperation can take place in many, many forms. So in terms of answering your question about when we feel stuck and how to navigate that stuckness, it's something that, I've been through on many occasions throughout my life. And I think with the stuckness is not to dwell upon where you are and the feeling of being stuck, but it is to take action. And it doesn't have to be even inspired action, but take any action, because it is the action that then creates a reaction and then further reactions. And then suddenly you find yourself in a place where it becomes perhaps your purpose, or it becomes a place that you are happy to be at. So when clients often say they feel stuck in their career or stuck in their relationships, I often ask them, what is the one smallest task or action that you can take today to move you forward? And it might be writing in a journal. It might be taking a walk. It might be talking to a loved one or a friend. It might be doing some research on Google about a topic or an interest or a course they want to take. But that's how we discover our purpose. Our purpose is found through action, not through stillness and ruminating, on our desires.
Beautiful. Yeah, a couple of things are coming up in my mind. You talk about the word collaboration, and I think we've come out of the age of competition. I mean, not that we're out of it, we're still in it, but there's this sense of it's a dog eat dog world, and we've got to, compete for success. And this idea of working together isn't, it takes a while for the collective to shift, to make a shift from that sense of competition to collaboration. And we learn that at a very young age in school. There's this constant emphasis on who got a good grade, or who getting A, B, C's, D's, E's, F's, whatever. I don't know what they do in Australia, but there's this sense that the ones that are, get, do the test right or achieve the desired results get, acknowledged for that. And this sense of working together in collaboration kind of does away with that, this competition and that need for recognition. And so I can see that people like you that are writing articles and books and helping people, perform or succeed or achieve their goals, that might be on the leading edge of this kind of new paradigm of working together. That we're transcending this notion of survival of the species and competition to working together. So I'm just acknowledging you for bringing that consciousness, that awareness through your work, through your writing to the world. It definitely is time for that kind of work, because we're not seeing that the competition, the trying to be the best, is really what's going to bring peace and happiness to humanity.
So I think it's really about sharing and sharing one's knowledge, one's wisdom, one's skills and talents to the world, make it freely available. And that's why I write, weekly articles. I don't have a paywall. I don't charge for it because I know that it's serving others. And I recall Marianne Williamson said many years ago that she taught a course in miracles for over 20 years. There were people attending that course every week, and she taught that for free. And so it's about, giving of ourselves. And I don't mean that everyone needs to give of themselves. And, if you've got an electrician who comes over to your house and does, work, I'm not suggesting that they do free work. I'm just suggesting that we find a medium where we can cooperate. And it might be sharing information, sharing knowledge, sharing wisdom, and making it freely available for the world. And it's that sense of cooperation that will actually excel humanity, and not only humanity, but humanity's consciousness into the next millennia.
Yeah, well, that's what we're doing here at the New Thought Media Network. We're offering videos and shows and classes and all kinds of things at no cost. And so I think there's a lot of people, not just the New Thought Media Network, but many of people all over YouTube and social media that are interested in sharing and helping and supporting and bringing more light and cooperation and kindness to the world. So
Indeed.
I always end my show with this question. And we all know the song, What the World Needs Now is Love, Sweet Love. And that can't be denied. What does, from your little corner of the playground there in Australia, with the current situations going on globally, what does the world need now, Tony?
I think the world needs to acknowledge itself and acknowledge that it is going through a change at the moment, and that change is for the better. And that change is going to bring about wonderful circumstances, opportunities for humanity if we embrace the understanding that it is through cooperation and collaboration that we can actually make the world a greater place. So it's the sense of acknowledging where we are, and that we are continually evolving as a species, and that our work is never done, and that we will continue to evolve, and that it's okay to be where we are right now. And that's not to suggest that, it's okay for there to be, wars and so forth, but that we are transitioning, and this transition will take place, irrespective of whether we like it or not. And to be more compassionate with ourselves and one another as we do undergo this transition.
Beautiful. Well, you heard it here, direct from the mouth of Tony. Thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your journey, your path, and what it is you're doing in the world. And I trust and know that the lives that you touch with your generosity, those lives will be lifted up and inspired. So thank you so much, Tony.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Ali. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And thank you to everyone for watching. It has been another wonderful conversation with someone that's really, really making a change in the world. And wherever you are and whatever you're doing, I hope you feel the love pouring from this screen, from this show, from the New Thought Media Network and the thesatyacenter, and from my heart to yours. And next week, let me check my notes. Yep, next week we've got Eamon Duffy of New Thought Men's Community sharing an uplifted experience of soulful masculinity. So I will see you next week. Mwah. Peace and blessings. Goodbye.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge.